everybody, this is Talking Jobs with me, rbromnick, and today we're going to be returning to the theme of interviews. It's such an important part of your career journey because you've all worked really hard on your degree. You fill in an application form, which is no easy thing to do these days, and then you get to actually meet the employer. It might be by Skype, it might be by telephone. Employers still like to meet people, so you will get the chance to go face to face with an employer. When I talk about employers, I'm also talking about course leaders if you're going for a postgraduate program that has an interview stage. And I will be doing a follow-up recording with somebody from psychology who's interviewed lots of students and will give you some insider tips for answering questions about psychology specifically. But we're returning to the theme because I've done a recording already on interviews, helping you get prepared. We're going to sort of return to that theme with some more tips today. Before we start, I just want to say our career service, absolutely fantastic. If you haven't interacted with them so far and you're looking to get some help with interviews, you seriously need to find out what they offer you, because Starting Point Blackboard, there's an interview simulator. It's so cool, you've got to try that. It's especially if you feel that you need a bit of confidence boosting. That's on Blackboard, interview simulator. You can meet a careers advisor, one of our skills advisor. You can practice with them. If you're signed up for the Lincoln Award, you get a chance for a mock assessment centre, which could be part of the interview process. Seriously, there's so much that they offer. There's different employers that come on campus, and look out for those ones with the top 300 graduate employers, because they tell you not only about their organisation, so there's things like the HMRC and Teach First and people. They don't just tell you about what they do, they also give some insider tips on how to survive the interview process and what they really look for in graduates applying for their sort of schemes and programs. So go onto the UOL Careers website if you haven't been already. Pop in ground floor of the library. There's so much you should really take advantage of. I can't recommend it more strongly. So stay tuned. This is Talking Jobs, and we're going to find out some more. So let's meet our guest. Today, back in the studio, Lyn Wakefield!
Woohoo! Hi! Thanks for having me back.
Hey, now Lyn, before we talk about interviews, okay. I know you like people to develop their skills.
Absolutely.
And even when you go into the workplace, you still have to develop skills.
All the time.
So I'm trying,
is
my new skill, I'm trying to do these podcasts and put in a bit of music.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is do like a little intro for yourself, and then see if I can edit in some music.
Right.
So it's going to go like this. Welcome everyone, welcome back, Lyn Wakefield! Woo! And now, if you just heard silence, it means I failed. But hopefully I'm going to run a little bit of music, because it's so good to see you. People really loved the first podcast we did together. And so I brought you back to talk about interviews.
Okay.
So if people listen to that other recording with Lyn, they'll hear that she's highly qualified to tickle this topic. So let's just start with an overview, sort of, Lyn, can you whittle it down to like a starting sort of point of what you think is really important for interviews?
Yep, no problem. So here's the thing. Interviews are quite nerve-wracking in as much as we are generally attending them because we want something at the end of it. We want the outcome to be that we nail that job, in terms of there's an employer that we're interested in. We've gone through an application process. As you said at the beginning, we've invested quite a lot of time in making that application look attractive, so we've got to the next stage. What I always say to people that are preparing for an interview is, don't forget it's a two-way process. It's a conversation with some other human beings. So if you find that you are generally going to be nervous in those situations, you're absolutely not alone. I always am. I think a little bit of nerves is helpful. Yeah. But do look for some resources to help you to start to think about easy tips to manage your nerves. So it might be something as simple as making sure that you sit up straight when you're in an interview if it's in a face-to-face, so that you breathe properly, etc. But there are loads and loads of tips out there, and of course each of us is individual as to what's going to work for us and what it is that we're looking for. But the biggest tip ever is be prepared. So the way to feel more confident in an interview is to absolutely be all over it in terms of what is the job role, what does the person's specification say that the employer is looking for, what do you bring to that role, what examples can you give, because often in an interview situation one of the key questions we get asked is, tell me about a time when.
Yes, so you get those scenario questions.
Absolutely. And if we've not prepared, because we've not taken the opportunity to look at the person's specification and the job description, which kind of will give us really good clues as to what those questions are likely to be, we've not done ourselves any favours, because trying to come up in an interview setting with a range of good examples as to how you did have a time when you needed to manage multiple workload requirements, or you needed to work with a team player that perhaps you didn't get on particularly well with, or you didn't know, etc. It's really hard to think about positive, constructive, flowing examples to give to an employer if you've not prepared them.
Really good advice, because I mean, at the bottom line is every question you're asked is about, can you do this job?
Yeah.
And I think for new graduates as well, they get those scenario questions because they might often have not done the job.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's if you're a bit further down in your career, if it's someone like myself, say going for a new lectureship, I have no plans to do something. I might be asked about times when I've developed a new module or ran a program, so I can draw on direct skills. But for graduates, it's often more hypothetical because they might not have done the job before.
No, certainly they might not have done the job before, but most often the skills that an employer's looking for at that stage of our career are more about those transferable skills, or those being a human skills, which we gain through all sorts of experiences, not necessarily being in a similar role to that in the past. So it's really important that, again, if you're sat in front of an interviewer, they ask you those questions, you think, my goodness, I've never been in that role before, I don't know what to tell you. If you have got the opportunity to be much more thoughtful about it and have a good think in the bath, a good think when you're having a run about what examples you might give, you're likely to come up with a much wider range.
So it's about thinking how what you have done could be relevant for that particular work, and have a think about that before.
Absolutely.
So employers might ask, can you tell me about a time, or can you give me an example of when, or sometimes people get asked, what would you do if?
Yes, they do. They're a bit less easy to mark, I think, from an interviewer's perspective, because we're asking something hypothetical at that point. And then I could say anything. I could say, well, do you know what? I would champion the world, and I would, I'd do something awesome. I'm more interested when I'm interviewing to draw out of someone some great examples of what they have done and how they see that their skills are relevant to what it is that we're looking for, because it demonstrates a self-awareness as well. One of the techniques that I think is really helpful to help us prepare is what's called the STAR technique. So when we're thinking about different skills and different competencies that an employer is looking for, when we are writing an application, we also use the STAR technique. So that's thinking about a particular situation. So what was it? What was the challenge? It is. The T of the STAR is thinking about the task. So what actually was I required to do in order to resolve the situation, harness the situation, take advantage of it? It's not always a challenge. Sometimes it can be an opportunity. What action did we actually take? So what did I actually do? And that's really important, because sometimes I've sat across interviewers and they've talked about we. And I love that you're a team player and you're telling me we, but this is the time to say I. So really think about what it is that you've done that made a difference. And then finally, talk about the result. If you had to have that in your head while you were sat in an interview, as well as listening to the questions, as well as thinking of an answer, it would be quite a challenge to do. So the chance to do it offline and think about a range of examples that meet those specifications that the employer is looking for beforehand means that when you get into the interview situation, you've already got in your backpack, hopefully in the back of your head, some examples that you can pull out. You still won't get them 100% right because you're still going to be nervous, but it gives you a much better chance of giving an employer a really nice, rich, full answer to the question, rather than, well, I did this and that happened. You're kind of giving them the context.
It's more reflective, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of employers, particularly for some of the work that psychology students want to do, if they don't want to go into teaching or therapeutic work, they're not looking for perfect employees.
Absolutely.
But they are looking for reflective practitioners.
Yeah.
So this happened.
Yes.
And this is how I dealt with it.
Yes.
So the example doesn't always have, in my opinion, doesn't always have to be something that went right.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would really recommend that we have one that didn't, because then we can start to demonstrate what we learnt from that, what we would do or did do differently. Because you quite often still get a question about, so what are your weaker areas, which I don't like, but there you go, it's still asked. And it's about thinking about an area that perhaps you would like to develop more. So you present it as an area that needs improvement, and we all need improvement, as we said at the beginning, we're developing for the whole of our lives in terms of our skills. But it's about saying, and here's what I learnt about that, and here's what I did do or would do differently next time.
So to put a bit of meat on the flesh, I'll tell you an example from one of our students. So this was an interview for social work, and they asked her to give an example of time when she'd been in a team and what she'd learnt from the experience. And she'd been in a seminar that I'd run where they'd done some group work. It was over an afternoon, and there was an instruction booklet for the group, which a member of the group had taken. And told the group what they needed to do.
Right.
And this particular student, we'll call her Sue.
Yeah.
Sort of sat back because she thought seminar, group work, whatever. She was interested but not forthright in any way.
Yes.
So the student who took the booklet with all the instructions of what the group had to do, as it was to transpire, hadn't read the instructions properly.
Oh dear.
So this group went off on a sort of tangent and didn't complete the task in any way that I was predicting or imagining.
Yeah.
And ran out of time because of the thing. So when she went to the social work interview and they said, tell us about a time when you work in a group.
Yes.
She talked about this seminar.
Yeah.
Because she was able to reflect and she thought about it afterwards and before the interview. That it could relate to social work when you're in a multidisciplinary team. And she sort of reflected on having not taken responsibility for reading.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And they gave her a lot of positive feedback because they said everyone else had given an example of, I ran the world. I organised a trip to the Himalayas. But she gave quite a small example from her academic work, but was able to reflect on it in a professional way.
Yeah, and it is really important. I mean, when you kind of hear, when you're interviewing people and you're interviewing for one job, of course you're going to start to hear very similar answers. So if someone can think of something that's slightly different like that, it makes that candidate stand out. It engages you with them more. You can feel yourself sitting forward even.
You want to hear what they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels more like a conversation. And if you think about it, when you're interviewing someone, you're not only interviewing them against a criteria, you're also interviewing them against an inbuilt criteria as to, can I get on with this individual or not? So if someone starts talking in that way and they make themselves more accessible, it just engages you a little bit more with them, especially if you've heard the same thing 12 times that day.
I think as well it's about, when I've interviewed people, I want to trust them.
Yes, yeah.
Can I trust them to meet a client, or can I trust them to handle this data set, or whatever it is I'm working with?
Yeah.
And it's that trusted way. So we're talking about standing out from the crowd, and the example I gave from that student was from our academic experience. Do you have any other tips about how to stand out? Because everyone does the same degree, or everyone has a degree, and everyone does dissertations and projects and modules, and those give you a lot of examples, evidence to draw on, because especially for our students' dissertation process, or wherever you do your dissertation, you're dealing with ethics, you're managing a problem, you're working under supervision, there's lots of transferable skills, but everyone does a dissertation. So do you have any sort of, how can you make yourself special?
Okay, so here's the thing. if we all think everyone else is going to describe that in the same way, we might not do it justice. So the one thing I would say is make sure that you really do reflect on that, and you make sure you've got some good examples from that as well, rather than thinking, oh gosh, that won't make me stand out from the crowd. You know, get the basics right first. It's the foundation. I would also suggest that there are going to be some outside of university activities that you can draw on. A great thing to do, especially in the earlier years at university, is to go and do some volunteering. Not only does it give you a toe dip in terms of what kinds of world do I want to work in afterwards, it also gives you that opportunity to try out some skills, to learn about some different approaches, and then you are starting to stand out from the crowd because you've done something a little bit different. And as you said, it doesn't have to be a positive outcome. It can be, do you know what, I went there and I really didn't like it. And that's fine, but it's putting it in a way that demonstrates you've thought about it and that you've been thoughtful about it. The other thing that I would say is also think about your leisure time. So what do you do? A lot of students say, oh well, yeah, but I did plan a holiday for 6 of us. And I'm kind of saying, well, okay, so now think about that from a more business-like, professional perspective. What skills did you use for that? What went right? What would you do differently next time? And use those kinds of examples as well. But it's having that mix. And you need to think about the mix that's appropriate to that organisation. So the challenge there is finding out about the culture of the organisation that you're going to the interview for. Some organisations want to hear about something that feels a bit less professional, a bit more casual. Some absolutely don't. So you need to figure out what kind of an organisational culture they have in terms of what you are prepared to not take a risk on, because that's probably a little bit too dramatic, but you need to think about what's going to be appropriate for that audience.
I suppose, whilst you were talking, I was thinking, gosh, how would you research that? But I guess it's about knowing, when you do that research about an organisation or a course or a university, it's about knowing what their values are.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
You know, and a lot of places, like if you work at Lincoln, you know, we have a strategic plan and we have mottos or something. Yeah. And most organisations will have a mission statement or something like that. So I think, do you think that to me would be a way of finding out about the culture?
That's a good starting point, and certainly that's the culture that the public facing culture. Equally, you can look at newsreels and you can look at tweets and look at the language that they're using and start to think about the language that they're using. I mean, it might, if you're going for 50 jobs, you're not going to do that for every employer. But you'll soon get a feel for whether or not it's a more innovative organisation, or it's an organisation which is primarily about caring for its service users, etc. So you'll start to get a feel for the broad culture. So yes, strategic plans, values I would absolutely look at, but I'd also start to look at language and the informal stuff as well.
And one thing I think you'll agree with me here, Lyn, is that when you draw on these examples, employers like them to be recent, don't they? Because sometimes when I'm talking to students, they've sort of engaged with things and then they've sort of moved on. So they might have organised a ball at the 6th form, or they might have been a brownie or done the Duke of Edinburgh Award, all fantastic things. But they haven't done anything much since they were 16 or 18. It's like tick, I've done tick volunteering. And it starts to, the longer it is since you've done that, the less powerful it is as an example.
Yeah, absolutely.
You agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, you know, we all have to draw back to one at least, because we've not got current examples of everything. But and I guess the more you know about the kinds of roles that you want, the more you can create the opportunities to have the experiences or to give the input with regard to those specific roles in advance. So you can kind of be a bit more canny in terms of where do I want to volunteer, etc. If you don't know, that's absolutely fine as well, because most of the things that we do through the whole of our employed life are transferable skills anyway.
Well, that's great, Lyn. Okay, right. So let's just have a think now. We've talked about the STAR approach and we've talked about answering those questions. Do you have any sort of final hints or tips for people?
Practice. So do lots of, it's preparation and practice. And if you want any support at all with regard to, here's the examples I'm thinking of giving for an interview, I don't want to do a practice interview with you because I'm not ready yet, but can you have a look at these?
Get yourself down to the
come to the career centre. We'd be really happy to help, because you know what floats our boat each time is when a student comes back and says, I nailed that interview.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for all you do for supporting our students.
You're welcome.
So get yourself down to the career centre, do your preparation, and keep in touch about any of your experiences, good or bad. We love to hear your stories. So good luck, everybody. You've been listening to Talking Jobs with me, Rachel Bromnick, and my guest today, Lyn Wakefield. Bye.